Brought to you by the Rugby Outlet Mall, equipping you for freedom and connection through rugby. Find out more at rugbyoutletmall.com.
Oh, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another great episode of Grow Rugby. My name is GiftTime Ebelu. This is the podcast where we talk with people about the opportunities that they have found, experienced, launched, and subsequently engaged with via rugby. We have a great guest, and actually, to be honest with you, this is a bit of a throwback. So we've had a bunch of interviews that got released before, but maybe didn't get as much catch. And I think this is as good a time as any to be able to put them because these were great. I got this great one by, I've used the word great, I literally 3 times already. I just realized that. But I have this great interview by Jackie Finlan. This was about 3 years ago. So I'm not going to lie. It's old, but it's not aged. And if you don't know who Jackie Finlan is the editor-in-chief, the founder, the legend of the Rugby Breakdown. She was an incredible story, just hearing it from top to bottom. I don't know if there's that many interviews that actually involve Jackie, and I thought it was a real honor to be able to get her and to be able to talk with her at that time. And I think it's important to be able to see it because it not only lets you know about the people that are doing the work and that completely interact with how we view the sport today, but it's also to get good to know that they are people behind the scenes as well too, and they all have their own stories, and they found a way to try and make this path. Right now, you can find her stuff on therugbybreakdown.com, or you can find her on Facebook at The Rugby Breakdown, and honestly, great stuff following girls and women's rugby of all ages and all levels. And when you talk about in-depth coverage, she is getting the depth. That is the reliable source to go to for all this. So I hope you guys really enjoy this. Please, thank you to the people who have left reviews on Apple Podcasts, iTunes. It really means the most. Guys, we're trying to get this up. I want to see if we can get 10 reviews before the end of the month. We're at 3 so far, all right? 3. So all I need is a 7 before the end of the month. So if you guys could please leave a review, good or bad, make it 1 star, make it 5 star. I am so narcissistic that I just want to be able to see that there is attention, and it also lets me be able to know exactly what it is that you guys are liking and don't like, and what we can start to add and implement into this. We're almost at 20 episodes. It made a big deal for myself to be able to get to 20 episodes, and we got some great guests that are coming up along the way. So to be able to reach 20 episodes, that's essentially almost 20 weeks of work. Now, I think early on, I did 2 a week. So it might be closer to like 18 weeks when it all comes down to it. But still means the most. I'm so happy for everyone who listens, everyone who's gotten to check it out. And, I truly, truly appreciate it. Of course, we got a sponsor still, the Rugby Outlet Mall. Definitely check it out. We got throughout our first set of orders for shirts. Really felt good. I really appreciate those that actually made some orders for the HBC Rugby Classic shirts. It means a lot. It felt really good being able to put that inside the post office. 100% wasn't sure if I'd put the right packaging amount right initially, but it seems like everything was good, and they should be able to get theirs in the next couple weeks, in the next couple days. So it really felt it was good to be able to do that. So definitely check out the merch. And, of course, the thing that I always like to reference on is the access and the categorization of movies that are available, from movies like The Nomad to anime shows that are available that you can find. And, a lot of people always wonder where you can find these movies and stuff. Well, hey, here's an orchestration of pretty solid movies within rugby that you can check out. And within that rugby movie scape, please check out our documentary, Singapore to Tokyo, Any Way We Can. It's streaming live now on video on demand. You can find it at redearthfilms.vhx.tv. Great documentary, 7 episodes, 20 minutes per episode. It is going to be legitimately worth the watch for you. I think you'll enjoy it deeply, and definitely a great family affair. Gets you a chance to be able to remember what it is to travel and what it was like to be able to be around people on a regular basis without the worry of a contamination or hospitals filling up or plausible death coming up on the other side of it. So definitely is worth being able to check out and enjoy and see. So also, just want to throw a couple little news things out there before we move on to the interview. One, congratulations to Hawaii as they are getting ready to put in for a registration for an MLR team, making it the first ever professional team, period, to be solidified in Hawaii. I can't wait to hear more about what they're going to end up having to get done. I can't remember their name off the top of their head. It starts with a K. I know it is a Hawaiian name. But I'm not gonna try and butcher it because I respect them too much, and well, I'll really butcher it if I try and say it right now. But big congrats, because that's huge, and of course, even within all this chaos that's occurring, it's nice to see people still trying to make moves during this time. And then the other thing is shout out to my guy Grant Cole and Paul Emmerich. For being able to implement Rugby HTX, which is the academy team that will be in association with the Houston SaberCats. So it looks like they're bringing that program back again, and we're talking about two really dedicated coaches. Paul Emmerich is a former USA Rugby. He is so notable for being part of the USA Rugby promo where he, gives a salute. I think this was during Rugby World Cup 2007, if I remember. But a great shot and really great guy, really knowledgeable guy. And then Grant Cole, who I consider one of the most connected people in rugby, former media guy and consummate rugby evangelist, and self-proclaimed rugby evangelist as well too. So they'll be running the show on that one. So definitely go. Congrats to them, and check it out. And if you have the intent or potential of wanting to be part of the MLR, they're a good way to be able to go about that. So just wanted to let them know, let it be known, let it go what's going on. But anyways, without further ado, let's get in. Jackie Finlan of the Rugby Breakdown.
Grow Rugby, Grow Rugby, Grow Rugby, Grow Rugby, Grow Rugby.
For being able to take the time to do this. I know you're ridiculously busy, so I do appreciate it big time.
No problem at all. This is actually my first interview or podcast. So
look, we get a chance to all this time you've been on the other side. It's nice to be able to flip to the other side of the interview table every once in a while.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I might have a different opinion.
Well, I hopefully it'll go good. I feel good about it. I feel good. So, just kind of, starting off, like what got you started playing? What got you started in rugby?
I transferred schools, and I used to play softball, and then I transferred to the #1 softball team in the country. So I needed to find a new sport, and that was rugby. So that was at Arizona, and then it was, everybody's story. They touch a ball, they make a tackle, and then they fall in love for life. So.
I mean, was it so? Were you originally at Arizona? You went to University of Arizona or Arizona State?
So I transferred from the Coast Guard Academy, and then I went to the University of Arizona.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
And so what was that process like? So was it just like, I'm now part of this like top softball team. I'm not getting on the field very much. Oh, look, all of a sudden rugby, or what was it? What was the transition?
Oh, I didn't even try out for the softball team because my old coach, I was like, oh, what do you think my chances are? She said, well, you might be a pinch runner. So I was like, all right. So I didn't even try out for the Arizona team. I just immediately looked for another team sport that I could make friends with. And The Coast Guard Academy women's rugby team had just started, so I had just become aware of the sport, so that was top of the list.
Oh, that's good. At least there was already a very, at least there was awareness that you had going into it, so that it kind of helped the transition. Now, obviously playing sports in college, does your family have a background in athletics, or was it just, you happened to be the athletic one that broke through?
No, we all played sports. My brother, through the javelin at Bucknell, we all played sports growing up, so it was nothing new for any of us to be playing in college.
And where were you originally from?
I'm from South Jersey, so we associate with Philadelphia in terms of sports teams.
You guys are pretty rough out there. That's awesome.
Not back then, in the early 90s, the Phillies were a really fun team to rally behind, so I loved it.
So, being in that area, we always get this. For me, my origination is from like Pennsylvania, so I get like the whole central Pennsylvania kind of slow college town. I'm a college brat, but whenever I always got the impression of South Jersey, I think the only time I had it was a friend of mine who moved over, and that Philly area. You get either Will Smith, obviously off the top of my head, even though that's a little bit more Philly than Jersey, but then it is kind of this gritty kind of industrial kind of area. Is that accurate? Was that kind of the environment that was there, or?
No, I mean, I think that's probably something more of a North Jersey classification. Mm-hmm. Like, Jersey is the Garden State, and that pretty much comes from the southern part of the state. So, there's a lot of farms, a lot of rural.
Right.
Not too much grit where I was from.
That's awesome. So, so what got you, so you enlisted coming out of high school into the Coast Guard?
Oh, so it's the academy. So it's like, the Naval Academy, the West Point. So you're not enlisting, you're going to college for 4 years, and then when you graduate, you go
enlist.
Yeah. But I only lasted 2 years.
I was gonna say, it was a military background like a point of the family, or was it just? I mean, what? How come the Coast Guard? I guess for you.
Well, my dad, he was in the Marines, and I wanted to be an FBI agent growing up, and so he recommended some military background, and the Coast Guard is the most female friendly in terms of ratio.
Right.
And I like the water, so it kind of seemed like a good fit, but yeah, it just turned out. It wasn't. It just didn't work,
and that's part of the. Isn't that part of the process of growing up? Like you slowly get to learn what works and doesn't work for you, and you're able to kind of piece these things together. So, whenever you got to Arizona, you didn't end up trying out for the softball team, and you found the rugby team. What was that initial experience like for you?
Well, right off the bat, being like on the other side of the country, like you're just thinking about friends. Obviously, I was looking to be active, but you just want friends. And I mean, the rugby community is just so welcoming right off the bat. It's like, I feel like I have a pretty similar story to most people who start playing in college. You just find a bunch of like-minded people, a bunch of friends, and then a sport in which you get to do something totally unique for women. So, I mean, it really was like love at first sight type of thing.
Was there anybody that was kind of mentoring your pathway whenever you first got onto the team?
Well, the coach at the time was Nancy Purdon, and she's just very slowly I got to see just how important she was to, rugby in that area. Everywhere we went, somebody knew her. She just knew everybody. And so she was the first person that kind of took that environment of the team, like this happy little family that you have, and put it in a larger context. Mm-hmm. Once I started getting like what a connected and like just bigger community it was, like it really started, like it was something that I wanted to do like for my life.
Yeah.
So in that regard, definitely Nancy Purdon. Yeah.
That's awesome. And so you get this coach, and what was that first year like? Like how? Because I mean, look, even though it's all sports, and obviously there's a mentality that goes along with it, but you're going from softball from, for what it's worth, a more rigid system that was in the Coast Guard. You have an understanding for Arizona, but you go to rugby, which in the early '90s isn't the tight-knit organization of professionalism that we might be closer to have now. But what was that first year like, transitioning from softball, non-contact except for maybe a few hits here and there, to now I got to hit people on the field. I'm taking hits, I'm running with the ball, I'm doing so much.
Yeah, that was, I mean, we are talking about 15, 17 years ago. I'm trying to get back there. It was, I grew up in a football family, so just being able to go from playing in the field with your family and your dad and your brothers and actually getting able to do it, like that was just such a freeing, fun experience. And then, back then in that area, it was less rigid in terms of, like, we played on a team that had maybe some questionable players on there in terms of age or eligibility, but everybody kind of did in like the California area. So you got to play with some really experienced people and just see a different side that maybe you wouldn't get to experience now in college, because it is more, it's more popular, more regulated, as it should be.
Right.
So it was just like a really overwhelming, wonderful year, like totally life-changing.
And was it? Did you guys have success in that first year? Was it something that you were like, oh man, we're really winning and going, or was it just like, dude, I love this culture and it just keeps me going regardless of what the results had been?
Yeah, it was more. I think we were like a 500 club, like we could hold our own, but I don't think we won for any titles when I was playing. I also can't remember if like D2 national championships were happening then. I don't, so there wasn't necessarily this national title to aim for.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a little bit, I guess more social in that regard.
What about the teams that you guys were in the area? Was it something that what was the connection like? Because I here in the South, we have our teams obviously spread out amongst a radius of 8 hours, give or take. So it's just everything's spread out, and so if you're not willing to at least go a minimum of 4 hours to some place, you probably aren't going to connect too much with teams. Now Arizona, I know the West Coast is a little bit tighter knit, while more spread, has more options available, but it's a lot more close knit. Was that the situation that you guys had for Arizona, or did you guys have to travel a lot?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually pretty similar to what is still the case there now. Like, you have Arizona State and Arizona, which are 2 hours apart, but then everybody you play is in California, so that's a minimum of 6 hours. You go up to LA, that's 9 hours. So hopping in a van and spending half your trip in a car was totally normal for us, which it later made me laugh when I was playing in New York and we'd have to drive down to Philly and the team would be like, oh, let's me go.
No, I my family lives up in South Jersey too, in Morris Plains area. So I remember when I would drive around and I realized everything's a 4-hour radius around here in New York and everything. I was like, this is great. I don't have to go, 8 hours over to Tampa. I don't have to go 11 hours up to Carolina or 8 hours to Atlanta. I was like, this is amazing, Yeah. But people would be like, oh, this is such a long trip. I don't think they know, So you talk about how you played in New York. So what was that transition? What was the next step after you started playing at Arizona? What happened from there that led you to New York?
Yeah. So I moved back home, and then I was trying to get my feet career-wise. And once I got a job out on Long Island, I started playing for a new team out there, Suffolk Bull Moose. Mm-hmm. And then I played a couple of years there until I got a job with Rugby Magazine in the city, and that necessitated a move to Hoboken, and that's when I aligned with the Village Lions, which I would consider my home club. Like, yeah.
So, you'd always been working on communications whenever you were in school, correct?
Yeah.
What was the gravitation to that field for you?
It was actually when I was in the Coast Guard, and we had one of our first English classes. The book that we were assigned was The Perfect Storm, and I don't know if you remember that movie.
Yeah, of course, with George Clooney and everything. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, I was like really upset that this was the book that we were assigned, and I think that was the moment where I realized, I don't belong in this science heavy, field of study. I need, that's when I realized I wanted to stay in like liberal arts and English and so forth. So that's what I did in Arizona, and started interning at book publishing companies, and then just kind of really followed the jobs in New York.
Was there always kind of this intent to be able to go back to New York to work in that? Because, I mean, you're talking about East Coast, where obviously you carry most of these major publications. You're either going one or two directions, going LA or you're going, New York. Was there always an intent in that direction?
Yeah, as soon as I realized that was the field I wanted to pursue, I knew I'd have to get to New York at some point. And it took a couple steps, but yeah, that was the ultimate goal.
Yeah. And then, so you were able to you go to Arizona, back home. So what was the attraction to being able to? What were you seeing in rugby that attracted you to wanting to start to work professionally for rugby?
Well, that actually wasn't even on my radar. When I joined Suffolk, the women's team founder, Jenny Munster, wrote an article for Rugby Magazine, like how to start a women's club. Mm-hmm. And I was like, there's a rugby magazine? And immediately submitted my resume and was just like, you give me 2 weeks notice, I will quit my job and work for you, kind of thing. And it just so happened to align with their managing editor cycling out. So it was really luck. And so it was the matter of, it was like probably a month of realizing the magazine existed, submitting a resume, and getting hired. So.
And this was 2005 whenever you got hired for Rugby Mag, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So, you're right at that pinnacle. This is, we're about 2 years away from Rugby World Cup for 2007. It's kind of that like loose era of rugby, early 2000s, where it felt like things were starting to come together. You started to see the pieces. From your perspective, what was it that you felt was needed from rugby to help maybe take that next step?
Well, at that time, my mentor was Ed Haggerty, and he obviously had a grip on what was happening in the U.S., and so I was still really just like learning as much as I possibly could, and obviously you keep doing that every day. So I don't know if at 2007 I really had an idea of what would launch rugby to the next stage. I still needed to. I had yet to go to my first World Cup. I had yet to go to my first Women's World Cup. I think that's when it starts to set in, like what's different around the world. I don't think I had any epiphanies at that point in my career.
Well, whenever you switch, so I'll use me for example. So switching from a player to a media person, there's the obvious concept of increasing your perspective, because now you have to focus on more. But whenever as a player, it was very easy for me to be very insular. I play with my team, love the guys. Whenever we go into the games, it's me versus the opponents. We want to go kill the opponents. We'll have fun, but they're still the opponents. You get to know them because you played against them multiple times, but it's still kind of this very surface relationship that's within the competitive field. But whenever I moved into as a media member, it started realizing a lot more. I started seeing a lot more of the connections that came with people, especially with, you know, a lot of what I'll call old heads that had been playing for a while, and you start to see kind of a lot more whys as to what was happening in rugby in the general area. Whenever you moved over from player to media person, what was that balance like for you? Because it never feels like it's a very, you know, cut off one and then you go to the other. It always seems like there's an overlay. Like, what was that transition like for you?
Well, I think you find yourself, for example, like at drink ups, talking, like educating people, you know, instead of like when you are just a player, you can talk about the hit or this, you know, the player, you know, connect like that. But then when you have this next level knowledge and you realize that that's a huge barrier, I guess, like towards growth, like people just not understanding what's happening, whether it's in the next state, the next region, the country, and you're just perpetually like fueled to educate that, you know, that president or that match secretary or, you know, whomever, whenever you get a chance to talk to them face to face, because you know that the more that people understand, the more about the country, like, you know, we'll be more connected, we'll share more information. So I think in that regard, getting into the media and melding that with the whole, like, still being a player, it definitely changed some of my casual conversations with people face to face, because you just feel like you always feel compelled to, you know, educate people without sounding condescending.
You're just like, it's like, I've received all this knowledge, but how do I tell you without coming off like a know-it-all?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and I can see that. Like, again, you know, I've always found that, you know, once I've started taking in all this information, and like you said, you start wanting to say, okay, instead of it, let's being about, oh, what did we do this weekend, or oh, let's go out and do this. It's like, man, we got like some real, you know, there's some issues or obstacles, or there's this exciting thing that I'm seeing. Like, did you guys know this and this and this and this? And people kind of look at you weird. Did you, especially in an area like New York, where, you know, you guys have such a encompassing amount of rugby, did you feel like there was maybe well, let me restate the question. Was there kind of a dichotomy difference in what you felt, what you kind of felt with the players versus what you felt with this greater knowledge? So what I mean, and saying it better, being able to play and being able to see these things differently, what did the interaction with the players, your teammates, end up being like? Did you feel like they were more opportune to be able to take in information, or?
Yes and no, because I think when you're in a team, you know, that they've got so many other concerns going on, you know, who's starting, you know, these connections, blah, blah, blah. And like, sure, you can sit down and talk about some of that, but really that was kind of shared amongst the, you know, like the leaders, the board. Like, I think they were pretty educated on a, you know, day-to-day basis. We weren't really talking bigger issue. But they kind of knew that they could always come to me if they did have a question. And at the very least, you know, I could connect people. But yeah, otherwise you indulge that too much and they start walking away from you at the like, here comes Jackie with her diatribe. So you gotta balance that a little bit.
What was one of the most revealing things that you found out, that you discovered, whenever you started accessing that administrative information? Like, whenever you started researching more rather than just being a participant? Like, what was one of the most surprising discoveries that you found for yourself, or revelations that you found for yourself?
Well, I guess kind of in the same regard of, you know, when you're on your team and it is very insular and you're focusing on like just you, the fact that I am all day, every day on different websites for different teams and different leagues, and this is not, you know, major revelation, is like how much, you know, you do neglect the people who are trying to learn about you, and how easy it is to just, you know, update your schedule or your contacts. I was just really surprised that clubs weren't doing the super easy things to, you know, promote themselves, or, you know, to be known. And I mean, a little bit is that a professional like frustration. But yeah, it was just, it's something I always harp on. That's not it's totally interesting.
No, it's true though. Like even for me, I remember the reason, one of the things that had caught me whenever I switched over was, I would go through and I would look at everybody's Facebook pages, and initially I'd look at everybody's website, and you'd find so many sites that were just not updated. All right, and let alone, let's say schedule is one thing, but it was like history. It was like, what did you guys do the last few seasons? Like, what is the ideas that I can create an emotional connection with your team? I can't find it because everything is either very surface, and by surface I mean a year and a half old, or it was just we're looking at just, oh, this is where our field is, and you can come play, and we practice on this day, and then that's about it. When it came to looking at it from a communication standard, did you find yourself feeling compelled to try and interact with these teams to educate them on how to be more accommodating, I guess, to say the least?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, with the exception of my own club, I won't necessarily tell an individual club. If it takes me an inordinate amount of time to contact someone, I might say, like, you might want to update your contact list. But, sometimes in articles, or, you write that top 5, like, must do for your, social media presence or, website presence. And that's always obviously one of them, be current. But it kind of seems like a no-brainer too.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. So one of the things. So I'll put it like this. It was about 2 years ago that I found out who you were. Again, when I did my initial sweep, it was Rugby Mag. Now Rugby Today, and I think it was This Is American Rugby, and then a Rugby Life with Headley LeGrand. I'd only seen those 3 sites going on, and for me, there's always that missing hole in the entrepreneur inside of me. Always is like, oh, what's this little piece here and whatnot. So then 2 years ago, whenever I found out about you, it was like I had been outside of this huge gaping hole that all of a sudden I entered in, and I'm like, everybody knows who Jackie Finlan is. Like, this is, how did I not know who this was? And in that process, like, when you joined Rugby Mag, what was the networking process for you? Like, that name consistency, because like I said, it seems like it was almost as synonymous, and from my perspective, as saying, oh, do you know what USA Rugby is? You play rugby, and you know what USA Rugby, it's, rugby, oh, you know who Jackie is, and go. So what was that process once you entered into that Rugby Mag field?
Well, I think still the women's rugby community is pretty close-knit. So once it didn't take long, I think, to really talk to everybody, or a lot of people, and you continue to do that. But really, there's like me and Wendy Young at Your Scrum Half Connection who were doing it consistently. So when you have 2 people, it's it's pretty easy to know who to go to. But yeah, I was also, the people I worked with were really embedded in the community, so that always helps. Obviously, Ed Haggerty and Alex Goff, then later Pat Clifton, those are people who are in every segment of the game, in every, different areas of the country. So whenever we'd go to events, that's a whole nother layer of people I would get to meet. And yeah.
You guys, between you, Goff, and Pat, I feel like it's a very underestimated, even if people realize the name Rugby Mag, but it was a very underestimated group, because the amount of articles that you guys are able to churn out and put out, even in your own individual instances, is amazing, considering where rugby is right now. You know, what, without saying, what's that process whenever it comes to you guys, to you personally, you know, even now, being able to say, all right, I'm able to gather this information from literally across the country. We're talking 50 states, you know, one commonwealth, and just being able to just drag this out quickly without feeling that overwhelmed nature of, am I missing anything?
Well, I think you always feel overwhelmed because there's no possible way, because you know that there is no way, you know, one person can cover everything and do it well. But I think, you know, like anything, you can take that overwhelmed sensation and just kind of use it as energy, you know, to just keep chasing and keep writing. But I think it's a perpetual process of trying to figure out how to, knowing you can't cover it all, how can you possibly attempt to touch every corner, you know, like not overlook something. So I can't say I necessarily have figured it out. I just keep trying to catch up.
Yeah, fake it very well, as long as it keeps showing, right?
Yeah.
You know, within like you said, you mentioned within the women's rugby field, you know, there's always a very limited. I think it was really the ones that came up to mind was, you know, Wendy Young with Scrum Half Connection. It was you with the Rugby Breakdown, and it was the ladies in England with
Scrum Queen.
Yeah, exactly. You know, whenever you have this niche, this group of people, like, what is it that you're seeing within women's rugby that, I mean, outside of the obvious obstacles, that seems to be ignored by the mass public? Like, take away the money situation, but what is it that you're seeing in women's rugby that feels like it needs to just kind of get that little trigger turnover to be able to maybe get more of the respect that it's well deserved?
Well, I think that's a multi-tiered question there. And when I think about those things, I think about what my role could be in it in terms of the answer. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's the whole reason behind the Rugby Breakdown. It's just getting information out there. So while we might have complaints that XYZ, you know, doesn't cover women's rugby, or it's not getting the press it deserves, like, the Rugby Breakdown is giving it that press, you know. So that's what I focus on. Like, at some point, someone's going to have a question, or they're going to want to learn about something, and I've had, you know, a ton of different outlets from different sports all over just kind of shoot me an email and be like, well, it sounds like you know what you're talking about. And if I can be a resource until more things change, then that's how I see my role in this, like, huge issue in, like, equity in women's sports. And it's kind of, yeah, grand.
No, that's awesome. Like, when did you realize, like, because obviously at the beginning of your career, you kind of were just like, oh, it's rugby, I get to write and do rugby media, this is awesome. But when did it get that moment when you were like, okay, this is my purpose? Like, when was that moment? What was that moment for you?
Well, I actually had always, you know, gravitated toward women's rugby, obviously. But when I was at Rugby Mag with Alex Goff, you know, he was always pushing me, like, you know, do the men's stuff too. I should do the women's stuff. We should share this kind of thing. And I always just kind of leaned toward the women's side. And then when we left and I joined him at Goff Rugby, it really did become, he did the men, I did the women. And then, you know, I was 35 years old, got to a point where I was like, okay, I think I can, you know, I just wanted to do something on my own and, like, have it be me. And so it was like a totally, you know, fine parting, and I just wanted to see if I could do it, and I also wanted to see what a totally U.S. focused women's site would look like. Because there was at that time, a lot of questions as to whether it could be sustained, if there'd be enough interest. And I was like, well, there's one good way to answer that question, and that's to just go and do it and, test it that way.
And has business been a facilitation? Has been a part of your biology in any way, or was this kind of like the first instance that you were like, this is my baby, this is like my business, and I'm winging it at this point, or did you kind of have an idea going in?
A little bit. I mean, this is definitely my first, what I'd consider baby, but through all the other entities that I had worked for, there is always, it's small staff, so you do a little bit of everything from designing ads to soliciting advertisers and, a lot of design stuff. So it certainly had some insight, but I've got a lot to learn.
Isn't that the fun of the business? It makes you constantly keeping you challenged in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah, for sure.
For me, I've when it came to women's rugby, and a lot of this realization came to me this last year and a half, probably about the end of 2015. I'm looking at the environment as to what rugby has, and I felt there was three things that rugby has an advantage of. It's one, it's because it's I use the term loosely, young sport in terms of actual development. It has the ability to kind of be creative in whatever way it wants to. If it grew within a digital scape, it would be able to completely earn its role there, because it's not an area that's very well tapped into. The other thing was that I felt that the equitability that comes with the play of women's and men's rugby is a huge advantage over other sports, because in any other sport there's always some kind of separation that goes between the women's and the men's side, whether it's rule change, whether it's uniform, whether it's culture. There's always something that just says, oh well, this is the WNBA and this is the NBA, what's different? Well, they can't dunk over here, but it can do it here, or it's hockey, it's whatever. There's always something that's there. But when it comes to rugby, it's the same across the board. The only thing that changes is the gender. All right. And then the third part was that you have an established global entity that is already all encompassing on all these controversial issues. So there's not an issue of, well, is there different genders in coaching? Well, rugby already has shown that women can coach men coach women. Boom, you have that. You have that in referees. Women, more so now, women reffing men's games, high level men's games at that too, versus and men doing it such and such. And you see the crossover, and you have this established global entity. But for me, it's always been what you can do within the women's sport. Like, there's the market that's there for the women. And I felt like rugby has done in general, has done a very poor job in really outrageously marketing the women's side. For you, whenever you see how they present it, what is the takeaway that you kind of get whenever you see how, whether rugby in the US or World Rugby presents the women's game?
I mean, it's definitely frustrating, because you see it at every event, and I mean, there are incremental improvements, but you are just you feel a little battered by some of the inequality there. But I don't really know what to say. I will say that I don't know if you read the board minutes from the last USA Rugby Congress thing, and I was pleasantly surprised to read about the the 2018 World Cup Sevens in San Francisco, where it appeared that they really had to battle with World Rugby to have it go men, women, and not just women in the morning, men in the afternoon. They wanted to integrate it so that it got more visibility. So those kind of things make you a little bit more hopeful. But then there are other things where, the USA women played Canada in Chula Vista for, 2 games in a week, and the first game wasn't open to the public.
Right.
And I asked them, they said it was more of a facility issue, but still it's,
it's a national game.
Yeah, it's the only 2 tests before they go to Ireland, and, it wasn't open to the public. So, I don't know, it's just really frustrating. Always.
Oh, and that's the thing. I've always felt that with rugby, like, whenever you see a separation within the 2 gender sides, it's very odd to me, because the issue still is the same problem across the board for both sides. Like, if you're giving more, time to the men, well, in my opinion, you're still not getting very much, because you're not seeing maybe you're seeing a little bit of growth in terms of maybe adult play here and there, and some in youth. But when it comes to casual fandom, like, that's the point where it's like you're not actually accessing new people. You're just kind of rotating this hamster wheel. So whenever you're separating the women's side, it's like you're running with half of your leg and your arm tied behind your back. And so I've always wondered, from those who have more experience within the area, what it always seems like to those who've known, like, why, what seems to be this constant why that there's this separation that they have, knowing that you're in a niche sport, you're niching a niche sport.
Yeah, I don't pretend to know the answer why it's separated. I assume it has something to do with money and, like, where the money is appropriated. But I think, there's a lot of, like, they used to do, I think a couple summers ago when France came out here, they doubled up with, like, the men's and women's game. Like, the women played first, and then the men came on and kind of, like, combined that. So if there is that fear that, the women couldn't sustain a bigger venue, like, that's an intermediate solution. And it does pair, it brings, like, the men and women together, so you have that full body exposure, like you were saying. I don't know, I think there's just a lot of funding and money issues behind that too.
Yeah. And look, you had the opportunity of working with a company that has, for what it's worth, shown that they at least have been able to eventually get to some kind of success in rugby with United World Sports. Has working with those guys given you kind of an insight into what is capable of working versus what might not be so hot? Because USA Sevens and, to some smaller extent the CRCs have been relatively, at least critically successul, and USA Sevens is slowly becoming more financially successful. Seeing that those mindsets, what have you been able to absorb from them?
Well, I definitely think USA Sevens is a successful event, and I enjoy it. But the women there, they were added this year because you had 3 entities there taking on the cost. So it was United World Sports, World Rugby, and USA Rugby that all got together to pay for the women to, be in the stadium and have that added stop there, or to have the stop relocate there. But it's been, pretty difficult in the past. Like, there's been this elite international sevens, part of the LVI, but you had national team women playing there, and they were playing out on, the Silver Bowl fields, which, is like dusty and it's not suitable for a national team. And it's, it's been difficult for them to get into this stadium. There is money value attached to it, and, that's what they used to rely on as part of their argument as to why there wasn't a bigger presence in the stadium. So it's been that overall, I'm grateful to have been part of that organization, so you really can see into those bigger events. But, it took some teeth pulling to get the women a bigger presence there. But, yeah.
No, that again, that makes sense. We see these encompassing things, and sometimes I wonder if it's just a matter of just a natural perspective. Like, whenever we were trying to put stuff together, like when we went to when Atlanta Sevens was happening, obviously the last couple of years, I remember me and then occasionally, one of my staff, we would go there, and we'd literally be probably about the only, media people that were at Atlanta Sevens, and it really threw me off because when I got there, I was like, this play is really high quality. Like, I'm pretty confident there's a strong 85% of the guys, maybe even within the national level, that might not be able to compete in this because they are so fast and strong. Talking to the women from New Zealand and US and France and England, and it's just like you see the quality, so I don't feel like there's that as an issue, but it always seems like there's something just missing. It's just that little bit that always seems to be missing, and it doesn't make sense. It never made sense to me.
What do you mean? What was missing?
Well, that's exactly it. It was you have like, all right. Whenever we talk about, maybe say when people bring up professional rugby, all right. So usually what I've always found when people bring up professional rugby, they'll say, well, one, we get paid players, so then we can get higher quality of play, which isn't necessarily always accurate. The other part is that you get proper venue. Well, when it came to Atlanta Sevens, Kennesaw State was a gorgeous venue. Like, for what it's worth, it's a really gorgeous soccer stadium that they have there. Atlanta, while I don't necessarily agree that it's the best sports town in the world, but again, the Louisiana in me is slightly petty towards that place. I think that it's a metropolitan city that is a top market. So it wasn't a matter of population. And then the other part has always been quality. Well, it's a national side. You know that for the most part, if you're going to say cream of the crop, the top 4 teams, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and England, you'll always be sure that they're going to bring their best. Whether it's a Portia Woodman, whether it's Charlotte Caslick, whether it's any of them, you know they're going to be bringing their best. So you're going to get good play. But yet, every time we would go, it would be a very Paisley response.
Oh, so what's missing in terms of making that event a success?
Exactly. It was what seems to be not catching, because for what it's worth, you have the ingredients there for success.
Yeah, I think it's because, the USA Sevens is like a private company, so they have different. They have more at their disposal, to promote an event. Mm-hmm. And I think also, they would have to choose basically between Las Vegas and Atlanta. And, it would have taken a big response from the women's community to be support this event. We might lose it. And, USA Sevens is a spectacle. It's hard to say no to it sometimes, if you had to pick
between the two.
Yeah.
Because they're usually about a month and a half between themselves. One opinion that I had with one of my friends is, was the nature of accountability. We were talking about it, and we were asking, does the rugby community, while the rugby community definitely always wants growth, obviously, but there's a certain level that you can only get to before you have to start creating accountability. From the club level, the college level, even at the high school and under, the U19 and under level, we always talk about the perception that is being created. Is there a business aspect that you're providing to your club teams? So whether it's, hey, we are going to sell XYZ, or we are going to charge ABC, things that would naturally create an inclination that says we want to take it up one. And we felt that, there is this fear of accountability that might be present in the rugby community, men and women. Do you have any sense, or do you think that, maybe it's just there's just that natural this is part of the natural organic rise that, where we're at right now is just kind of part of that process.
I mean, do you mean in relation to the former Atlanta Sevens?
Oh, no. This is just disconnecting from Atlanta Sevens. I'm sorry. I'm talking in terms of where we're talking in rugby in general. Like, we're talking club rugby, college rugby, youth rugby, and then what you can find as examples. I like that you have cats too. I got 2 of them as well.
Sorry. The interview.
Yep. I got these 2 that have been trying to jump in. I'm like slowly patting them away each time. But what I'm saying is that, what you see in USA Sevens for me, and consider me a bit of a rugby libertarian in this, because it's a private organization, and like you said, it has a little bit more room to be able to maneuver. It has done the steps that it needs to create what would be illicit value. Essentially entertainment value. It is, they charge, there's exclusivity, there is, at least for what it's worth, some emotional rise that goes to it. It is purposed where, there's a reason that people go and they want to continue to go to it each time. And then obviously when you get there, it's a party, it's play, whatever the rest of it that you find for rugby. So for me, I look at that and I say, why are you not replicating that across the board? Even Atlanta Sevens, even though it didn't have the same turnout, it still replicates that same kind of, or at least attempts to replicate to some extent that same kind of element. But whenever it comes to the lower ends of rugby, where we are constantly harping on why we need to be better and why we need to get more, and you're starting to push amateurism, the steps that are necessary to take it to the next level don't seem to be there. And it's almost a wonder of, as much as you say you want to be more, is there a fear of what that more can be?
I mean, maybe. Well, to the USA Sevens, like, that is their, with the exception, there's the CRC and Varsity Cup or whatever else they do. Like, that's their full-time job all year round, and their number one goal is, to make money and be able to do it the next year. And they do all these other things, like the adopt a country to get into, they do a lot of other things, but their goal is they need to turn a profit so they can do it again next year. Whereas, USA Rugby has a lot of different goals, or, they have a lot of different objectives. But I mean, if you were to take that entity and tell them, okay, your one goal is to sell out all the USA Eagle tests. They probably do a really good job, but they've just got. I don't think it's necessarily fair, to take a private entity and their singular goal and try to overlay that on top of an NGO. They're kind of 2 different things.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense. Again, this is the rugby libertarian that comes out of me, where I see these aspects, and it always comes back whenever we have arguments, and when people have arguments, and I know you see them on Facebook and Twitter and maybe not so much Instagram, but you'll see them pop up from time to time, and it always comes back to is, what is USA Rugby doing to insert whatever random problem someone wants to have? But for me, it's always been, well, as a club, and again, now I'm talking at the lower levels, not the national levels. As a club, you have an illicit responsibility to show value to your club. So if you're saying, oh man, we want to be able to travel more, we want to have a little bit more autonomy over what our schedule is, why can't this and this happen? Well, for me, I say, well, what are you doing to make your club and your product, essentially what your play is, better for more people to come in? Well, if you want more people who are more youth rugby people, well, why are you not trying to sell tickets to come to your event where you can mess with the values of it and say, hey, this means this, and now people have a actual, real, tangible, value that goes to your play on the field. So, hey, we can bring in more kids. We can travel places. We can do extra. Same thing goes with college. What people always say, oh, why are we not able to connect with the university? The university doesn't want to give us respect. Well, what are you doing to create a value that the university has to actually see? It's almost like the mission statement always seems to be, well, if I play a lot, people will come. It's the field of dreams effect. Like, if you play it, they will come. And it's like, I don't know if that's necessarily true. For you, seeing it from all the levels, because you have to follow all the levels of rugby. Do you feel, and that's why I go back to accountability, do you feel like there might be an illicit fear within the rugby community that if you take this next step, that, maybe the changes might not be what they want? There might be a fear of losing that special little core entity that makes up rugby.
I think maybe if you're talking about, when you were on that cusp of talking about, say, like varsity colleges and club colleges, there was a little bit of that, we don't want to lose that social edge to the team. But I think generally speaking, when it gets to that point where, a college is trying to afford that trip to nationals, now they have to fundraise like crazy, super stressful, that is kind of more impressive than the fear of taking the next step. Like, I think what a lot of clubs and teams need, they just need someone with some perspective, someone who's older, someone who can look 5-10 years down the road and say, we need to set up this, endowment. We need to think beyond our next championship fundraiser, and so I don't think it's some kind of fear that is, keep like holding clubs back or holding teams back from developing and taking the next step. It's just a layer of leadership that won't cycle out in 4 years, or like who didn't just become president for their senior year. And I think, there are a lot of, leagues and teams that are lacking another level of management that could, they could provide that insight. And so I don't really think it's a fear holding people back.
I think that makes sense. Kind of last question, obviously, like I said, you in my opinion, you are probably one of the premier writers that are here in the country when it comes to rugby, and probably one of the more knowledgeable ones that are here. I think what you do is amazing. What is the next step? What is that goal? What is the goal that you are aiming for next that says, all right, this is the marker that we need to achieve here for the rugby breakdown, for Jackie Finlan, for what we need to do with women's rugby? Like, what is that next marker for you?
The one thing I would really love to have is a cadre of writers, female writers who, because as we were talking earlier about workload, you do your best, but people who are like in their regions, who know what's going on, who have a voice and can really speak intelligently about what's happening in and around their community. I would love to manage a staff of female writers who could contribute and just really build this thing into, instead of just being my voice, because how boring does that get? Have a lot of different female voices talking about their sport in their region, and just, further connecting, the community out there to be educated and grow.
Oh, and that's awesome, and I can definitely agree with that. Hey, Jackie, I appreciate this so much. How'd you feel about this? How'd you feel on being on the other side?
Pretty good, I think. Yeah, I'm typically not great on my feet, but this is good practice, and I'm sorry also for the fire trucks now going through the back.
It's okay. It shows that you live in life, all right? You don't need all this quietness around.
True.
Oh, man. Thank you so much.
See what I'm saying? It doesn't matter the timing, just a great story, great diligence, and great forward thinking. And a lot of the things that she was talking about, she's kind of already made into fruition. Now she's got the subscription. Model going on for her article. She's definitely well worth the support. She's been using part of her subscription. She's been using her subscription fees last month to be able to support social justice movements and trying to be able to make a change. And that's a person that they want to be doing the right thing, not just because it's rugby or not just doing it because it's trendy, but doing it because they genuinely mean it. And she's a genuine person all the way through. It was really great being able to talk to her at that time, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, check out our website, therugbybreakdown.com. And it's I want to thank everybody for listening, guys. You guys can always check us out on if you're listening to it on Anchor, you can check it out Spotify, Apple, whatever. We'll have the video up on YouTube at youtube.com/GiftTime Rugby Network, and you can see the full video itself of this interview if you like to see the visual as much as you like to hear it. And guys, this was great. I hope you guys have a great week. I hope you stay amazing, and don't forget, I hope you stay happy. I hope you stay healthy, and let you know that you are highly favored. Talk to you later. Cheers.